talking about profile writing, this is y'all's first story that you're going to write. It's going to be a profile of a person. The instructions are on folio under story 1, story instructions, something along those lines. And they're what you see right now. So they're a little bit detailed. I'm going to walk you through it kind of slowly here, and then we'll just go through the PowerPoint, and it'll help kind of give you some more information. So, okay, what we've got here is the assignment's happening today. Your pitches are going to happen next Monday. Then you'll be working on your story until about the middle of February, when you'll have your draft due. And then your actual deadline for your story is February 24th. So the story is going to focus on a person. It's going to be something that you're going to spend a minimum of 3 hours with a person to get the content that you're going to use in your reporting. So you want it to be a person who you can spend that time with, not someone who is, so busy or so inaccessible that would be impossible. So think along those lines. You're going to interview 2 additional sources that are going to give you information to kind of, bolster the story that you've got. So that might be things like family members we're going to talk about today, or co-workers, things like that. Typically, you spend time observing and gathering information for your story beyond what you think you're going to need. Typically, you get more information than you need. That's part of why the time is so important. You want to allocate time before your pitches to select your subject. I said if you want to start early, you can email me. That's still the case. I don't think a lot of you are probably at that point since we're so early in the semester. But the next part says that your subject can be someone you know, but not someone you're close to. So, like, obviously not close family, close friends. But a friend of a friend, or a friend, a lot of times a friend of a parent is an interesting person for a profile. Also, people who you just come in contact with in the world. I put on here, people who fix your car. Everybody's got a story. So who you pick is entirely up to you, and who you pick does matter a little bit in terms of what you write and how well it's written. So spend some time thinking about it. If your subject is a student, they should be worthy of a profile without their student attributes. I would prefer you just not write about a student, but if you know one who would make a good profile because, for example, I put here, they're in the Olympics. They have a business, something that is not related to being a student. So whatever it is that makes them worthy of a profile should not be connected to being a student. So it should not be a profile of your sorority president, for example. So you must provide contact information for your subject. All that is an email, not a big deal. Y'all are used to doing that. You can look at what it says here for format. I do want you to pay attention to format. Story length is 1,500 to 2,500 words. Now, it's a pretty broad range, but some people write long in features. Some people have a really hard time with it. So we try to give some options. So there's 3 steps to the process. The first is you're going to do your pitch, and that's in class next Monday. You're going to have your information about who you're going to pitch, or who you're going to write about or want to write about, why you chose them, why you think others would be interested. If anyone has written about this person, that doesn't keep you from writing about it. It just helps to know, have they been profiled in the Georgian, for example. Any potential conflicts of interest, any sources and conflicts of interest we can talk about. So if you're not sure if it's a conflict, just write it down. Any other sources you've identified, because like I said, you're going to have 2 in addition to your main person. And then the last piece asks you to identify your audience, and I really do want you to be specific. This is something that, is mostly going to be read by women in the 20 to 30 age range, Come to the pitch meeting ready to answer questions. So for your pitch, I think I put in, and I meant to check and I didn't, but I'm almost positive that I want them in by 8 in the morning the day that we do them. So you actually put them in folio before class so I have time to look at them. And I'm pretty sure I said that at 8 a.m. But just follow the instructions on folio for when your pitch is due. And in terms of what you need to put in the pitch, that's what we just said. These things we just talked about, these bullet points, that's what you fill out for your pitch, okay? There's not a separate template. It's just this information. Okay, so the draft is going to be ideally a complete draft. If you have a complete draft to look at, I'm going to look at it, and your fellow students in your group are going to look at it, and you're going to probably have a really good story when it's all said and done. Probably have a really good grade too. So if you are somebody who is really, wanting to kind of just get the best you can out of this experience, have your draft be a complete and total totally finished draft. Now, if you're someone who's still working on your story and you're trying to, pull it all together and your draft is a little bit more loose, that's okay. We can still look at it. We can still give you feedback. But like I said, as close to done as possible. And then your story is going to be submitted at the start of class on Folio. Don't be late with the story. They're only, half credit for 72 hours. So for 3 days, you can get half credit. After that, nothing. So really, it's worth it to turn your story in, even if you're, not 100% maybe on some aspects of it. It's worth it to go ahead and get the full credit and then take a deduction or two. Okay, writing the story here, I'm not going to read these to you. We're going to talk about them in class at various times, but these are some of the components of writing a good feature profile. All right, so when you're writing your profile, you don't want to be writing a biography. You will include details about, maybe where the person was born and when. Maybe you'll talk about how many siblings they had. Maybe you'll talk about where they went to school, but we don't want it to read like, so-and-so went to school here and then they did this and then they did that. The story is all the other kind of information. So don't get so caught up in the biography that you kind of miss the bigger picture. So what is the bigger picture? The bigger picture is a story about a person. It can range from a story about a person struggling with body dysmorphia to a story about a person whose hobby is handmade trolls. As I said before, everybody's got a story. So your story, your person could be any number of things. You want to know, okay, so to define a profile story is a portrait of someone who is of interest to readers. I really flubbed that up. Do you guys know what that? You can read it, know what it says. A profile is a portrait of someone who is of interest to readers. Some examples. This is from just the last couple of years. We had a homeless man in Savannah who played guitar, made a really interesting background, an interesting story. Veda Broderick, if any of you guys know her, she's the co-owner of Tormenta. Interesting human being all around. And here's one that I stuck on here because I remember the student telling me they were going to do one about a contractor. Somebody who builds cabinets specifically, I think was like the aspect they were focusing on. And I thought, wow, that doesn't sound interesting at all. Ended up being a good story. So you never know where you're going to find your source, find your person of profile. So when you're looking for your focus, think about what's unique or significant about your subject. Why would anyone read your story, right? I will say that we get a lot of profiles that are people who are struggling through illness. And in some cases, those stories are better than others in terms of significant and different, unique struggles. That's all I'll say about that. Do they have special achievements? So have they done something that, other people have not done? Is their career something that's particularly interesting? Have they overcome obstacles? Have they had to deal with, with adversity, financial adversity, mental health adversity, any number of things. Your primary source may be someone you don't know, okay? So it can't be, I mentioned this already in the instructions, it can't be a relative or a close friend, and it's not typically a student. So it could be someone who is a friend of a friend, like I said. It could be someone who's like one step removed. Or it can be somebody that you completely have no connection with. The biggest thing is, why are they interesting, and can you spend 3 hours with them? Do they have a schedule in which will allow you to spend 3 hours with them? And when I say spend 3 hours, I don't mean that you're sitting there talking and interviewing the whole time. You're going to spend some of your time with questions for sure. It's good to bring questions and ask questions, but some of it will just be chit chat, getting a sense of who they are just by talking. So when you get ready and you want to interview your primary source, you want to explain to that person that you're going to need this time, because you need to say that up front. You don't want them to expect you're going to be there for half an hour and then, you stay much longer. You can split it into multiple days, by the way. Sometimes that's helpful because then you get an idea on the first day of the things you wanted to ask, the second day. Make a list of questions, but also just talk. That's what I just said. Do research beforehand. And when I say make a list of questions, I would never walk into an interview with anyone with less than, say, 12 questions, okay? You probably want to make one that's longer than that because of the amount of time you're going to spend together. You want to be able to have plenty, but don't feel like you have to use them all, okay? I may walk in with 12 and use 10. It's just whatever's appropriate and what still seems relevant when you're in the moment. We'll talk more about interviewing. Do research beforehand. Obviously, I mentioned like Vader Broderick. There's going to be stuff written about her, and we should know who she is and kind of what she does in the community. Ask follow-up questions, clarify history. So remember, don't just take what's written down that you're going to ask. Follow up on the stuff that they say and make sure you understand, oh, okay, you were born in this time and you did this at this time in your life and then you had kids. Okay, that, understand the history. For your additional interviews, I mentioned that you may have, connected sources. A lot of times the way to do this, if it works this way, is to interview your primary source and then ask them who they would recommend. So it may be that they have like a spouse or a child or like a coworker, or somebody they volunteer with or something like that. It could be really literally anybody, a customer, that's going to be your additional source. But sometimes you can ask your primary source for who those people should be if you don't already know. The additional interviews might be with family and coworkers I mentioned, friends, neighbors, professionals in the field. So if they work in a certain field, like if they're a professor, for example, you could ask other professors about them and do an interview with another professor that maybe works with them. Experts in anything that they're involved with, or if maybe they have an illness, then, an expert in that illness. People with similar experiences. And then again, if we're talking about illness, somebody else who has, dealt with that particular illness could be a additional interview. All right, so you want to ask for telling anecdotes. An anecdote is a small story within a story. Okay, and this is something we're going to talk about all semester. So you might as well go ahead and put this to memory. When I talk about anecdotes, I'm talking about a little story in the bigger story. I kind of think about them as a memory. Anecdotes are like memories. So here's an example. Anita said they used to race to the park as children. I remember winning the race once and feeling so grown up, she said. It was a beautiful sunny day and I was king of the world. Now, if she had just told us, oh yeah, they used to run to the park and it was fun, it'd be a very different experience. The memory that we got here painted a picture, right? Often these anecdotes provide a way into the story. So a short story will give your reader a chance to kind of get into what's happening. You want to identify overarching themes and sub-themes. So when we're talking about anecdotes and we're talking about your story itself, you want to kind of see where you are. So if this is the part that talks about, growing up, then maybe you want to identify that as a theme of your story. And the reason to identify themes and sub-themes primarily are a couple of things. One, you can tell if you have the potential for headings, because headings can be real helpful in the feature story and keeping things organized. And theme will give you an idea of kind of where you need to put your energy. If you have certain themes, it'll organize your ideas. Listen for details as part of anecdotes. Anytime somebody tells a memory, tells a story, make sure you get it down so you can include it. Some of my favorite childhood memories, here's an example. Some of my favorite childhood memories revolve around the time I spent helping my mother plant and tend a vegetable garden in our backyard. She let me help till the rows and plant the seeds. Going near okra plants made her itch, so she let me pick all of that myself. Fun, but it's a memory, right? Okay, anecdotes are key. We're going to talk more about anecdotes. Don't worry, but go ahead and start thinking about listening for them. Observations are also key in features. You don't just rely on quotes. In fact, you're going to probably use fewer quotes in most cases, in most of your stories. So you're going to find that it's not all about this person said this, then this person said that. It's more about telling the whole story. This person, they sighed and they looked away and they, gave us this context. You include what you see, hear, and feel in a situation. Okay, so your observations, your senses should be part of your story. Describe your subject, surrounding, and actions. So if you're talking to your subject, if you're interviewing them at their, say, place of business where they work, you might want to tell us what that place looks like. Is it crazy busy? Is it noisy? Is it silent? What's going on? What does your subject do while you're talking? Do they walk around the space? Do they, kind of sit with you patiently? Use your senses throughout the whole thing. All right, so that's the end of my talking about features and writing profiles. One of the things I have for to help you guys with your observation is your exercise this week is going to be looking at campus and describing it as if it were for a publication. You have to write the descriptive piece of campus for a publication. So that's what this week's writing exercise is. All right, so I'm going to see you guys on Monday. Hopefully everybody will get snow and it'll be lots of fun and we won't be power out and all that good stuff. But either way, I'll see you guys on Monday and we will do pitches then. Nope, that's not it.